we have beautiful national parks in this country. Of course, you know, Yellowstone National Park, we have Yosemite National Park, we also have the Great Smoky Mountains, and of course, we have the beautiful Grand Canyon. But what you might not know is we actually have 433 separate sites that are considered national parks, which encompass about 85 million acres of conservation land across the country. But now President Trump is on the hunt to increase energy production. We're talking oil, natural gas, critical minerals, stuff like that. Just guess, though, where he and his brand new Secretary of the Interior are looking to find those things. The only places they have control over: federal lands and waters, which may include some national parks or national monuments. Now, there's a lot to this story. I have all the receipts to share with you, which I will do in a second. But first, I want to thank my Facts HQ paid subscribers for voting for this story as the bonus this week. If you want to vote too, make sure you become a paid subscriber. There are a lot of other perks if you choose to do that. And if you don't want to be a paid subscriber, that's okay. I highly suggest, though, you sign up for my free Facts HQ email. It is an excellent resource. I send that out every single weekday. It is really easy to sign up. Make sure you do that immediately after you finish watching this video. Okay, let me back up so you understand how this all came to be. So during Trump's inaugural speech, he said this:
"That is why today I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill."
And that's exactly what he did. On January 20th, he signed two specific executive orders. One, declaring an energy emergency, which directed his entire administration to identify and exercise any lawful emergency authorities available to them, as well as all other lawful authorities they may possess, to facilitate the identification, leasing, siting, production, transportation, refining, and generation of domestic energy resources, including but not limited to on federal lands. Trump also signed this executive order called Unleashing American Energy, which directs the removal of impediments and burdensome regulations so the federal government can basically do whatever it wants to harness this energy. Now, it is under that power that President Trump's new Interior Secretary Doug Burgum issued orders 3417 and 3418 to his staff. Order 3417 says Trump is doing this for several reasons, including because in their mind, the Biden administration policies drove our nation into a national emergency where a precariously inadequate and intermittent energy supply and an increasingly unreliable grid require swift and decisive action. Burgum's order goes on to say that if they don't step in immediately, this will become a national security risk. Quick fact check here. I have been reporting on this page for years that, in fact, the United States drilled more oil than we ever have in our country's history under President Biden, culminating in 13.6 million barrels of oil a week being produced in this country in December of 2024. The highest number under the first Trump administration was 13 million barrels a week, and that was in March of 2020. Okay, back to what the Trump administration wants to do on these federal lands right now. Burgum's Order 3417 says all bureaus and offices of the Department of Interior will create a plan by next week to locate, permit, lease, develop, produce, transport, refine, and generate domestic energy resources and critical minerals, including but not limited to on federal lands and the outer continental shelf. In Order 3418, he repeats Trump's wording and says his department will encourage energy exploration on all federal lands and directs his staff to ensure that all of President Biden's climate change policies, his orders to strengthen national forests and resource conservation, are gone. Instead, Burgum says it shall be the Trump administration policy to prioritize reducing barriers to the use of federal lands for energy development consistent with the principle of multiple use. Okay, so how are they going to do that? That's where these national parks and monuments come into play. The United States government has a lot of federal land. In all, about 650 million acres, with the majority of the land in the western states and Alaska. It is not uncommon for the United States government to lease out that public land to big oil companies to drill for oil and other companies to extract other resources. Millions of acres of public land is either under active oil and gas drilling or under lease for oil and gas drilling or to collect those minerals and natural resources. But what makes this new order sort of unusual is Secretary Burgum does not take any federal land off the table for this assessment. which leaves these national parks and monuments at risk. So, of that 650 million acres of federal government land, as I said at the beginning of this video, about 85 million acres is designated as part of the national parks system. Of course, there are the famous national parks and monuments, but there are more than 400 of them, some with names you may have never even heard before. So of those 433 units in the national park system, 63 are protected forever by a law passed by Congress called the Antiquities Act of 1906. And I want to make it very clear that those 63 cannot be touched. And the Trump administration has given no indication that they want to break the law and go after those federal lands. That said, though, there are still 370 other national parks and national monuments that could be tapped under these orders. In fact, the National Parks Conservation Association lists 13 specific national monuments that also have known oil fields and minerals on them. They say this order from Secretary Burgum is a dangerous step towards dismantling protections for national monuments in favor of unrestrained and speculative fossil fuel and mining development, even though many of these areas have been protected for over a century. The organization says places like Devil's Tower National Monument in Wyoming, Jewel Cave National Monument in South Dakota, Dinosaur National Monument between Colorado and Utah, Sunset Crater Volcano National Monument, Scotts Bluff National Monument, and Bears Ears National Monument in Utah may be at risk. Now, we're going to have to wait and see what Secretary Burgum's staff comes up with this week and whether their plans to obey these orders collide in any way with any of these monuments or national parks. So if you want to look at all of the resources I used for this story, I am going to email all of them out to you in Monday's Facts HQ email.